Great. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for coming. It's a great honor to share some of our research on AI safety and security. So actually, yeah, I know today's topic is on watermarking, but this is like due to some travels, I just actually coming off from the flight from Japan. So very related to the previous talk on data, like IP issues in Japan, etc. A lot of interesting things I just learned in the past 2 days. So, okay. So therefore, if you missed some topic on 14th, and here is still a chance to catch up on AI safety and security. And apparently, the watermarking and IP issues is a big part of the AI safety and security. So first of all, let's jump right in. On the very high level, we can see that indeed, although like the different AI models, machine learning algorithms has been everywhere, including finance, like chat domain and the multi-modal domain, etc. And they have also brought us a lot of security and privacy concerns, as we all know. Like one of my favorite example is back in 2016, the associated Twitter account of White House has spreading the rumor saying that the White House has been attacked, which actually triggers autonomous trading bot to dump a large amount of stocks within seconds and swipe about $136 billion within seconds. And this really happens back in 2016. And then if people say, okay, now we're in 2025 and everything gets advanced a lot, right? Whether such things will happen still or not. Like we can see just a couple of months ago, I think 2 months ago, the Lyft stock price got jumped up by almost 30 to 50%, still because of a small typo in the annual report, which also triggers some streaming bot or whatever mechanism behind it, apparently. And then like buy the largest chunk of stocks within seconds and lead to such a jump. So this shows that indeed, even in practice, we have seen a lot of concerns led by such, misuse and like vulnerabilities and weaknesses of machine learning and AI technologies. No mention about, we all know for chatbot like ChatGPT, the outcome could be hallucinated, could have toxic content, and could misleading from different perspectives. And from the multimodal perspective, like even misarrest has happened before. So this has been shown that developing AI technologies is good, and making them secure and safe is very challenging and very hard, right? And therefore, based on all this, we can see there are a lot of regulations coming out, including the White House EU Executive Order from last year, and from European, the EU AI Act Executive Order, different like perspectives. So with all this, what we want to see is that how we can actually think about the problem of AI safety and security, and what's the principle or like orders that we should follow so that we can do a systematic understanding, like fixing and hopefully guarantee in the end for the security and safety and privacy issues, right? So here in this talk, I want to give a very high level principle and see how actually, at least from our group, like what we think about it and how the AI safety and security come along from different pieces. So the high level idea is that, say, if we have say on the left-hand side, we have an LLM or agent networks, which can be adapted to different like finance, healthcare, autonomous, different domains. And the first thing, we need to understand the vulnerabilities and weaknesses of the whole, like either it's AI systems or agentic systems, is the red teaming. So that we put the first component here to show that actually we should, just like software, we should consider this thing as a sandbox and then try to do either white hat or certain red teaming or risk assessment to attack the system such that we can uncover the vulnerabilities and weaknesses. On the other hand, AI systems are actually different with traditional software systems, because in traditional software systems, it's very challenging to find a bug. But once you find the bug, it's very easy to fix it. You just look at the code and try to fix it, right? But for AI system, even you find the bug, it's still very hard to fix it, as we know. Therefore, other components come in that, based on the red teaming results, vulnerabilities, like weaknesses we identified, we need to uncover and help fix the model in terms of two perspectives. One is fundamentally fix the model in the sense that can we inject different knowledge, like we have a line of work with different collaborators here, including Professor Bing and others, in terms of like how we can explicitly integrate knowledge to data-driven models to ensure that the model can follow different knowledge, different rules, such that to do a reasonable reasoning steps, right? So this is one challenging case in terms of how to fundamentally fix the model. And it's also possible to do like a lightweighted fixing in terms of adding a guardrail layer for both the input and output. So all the three pieces putting together is currently like on the very high level how we can think about this AI safety and security. From red teaming to fundamental fixed model to like add a, say, AI firewall or guardrail model such that we can guardrail both the input and output for AI systems. And for each component here, we again have additional like principles that we should follow. So here I want to give some like brief examples for each component, and hopefully that will encourage us to have more discussions for this line of AI safety and security. For example, starting from the red teaming part, right? So if we don't know what's the vulnerabilities and what's the weaknesses of the AI systems, there is no way we can discuss other like safety alignment and enhancement, etc. So we should start with the problem identification step. So in terms of red teaming or risk assessment, I bet everyone have seen there are a lot of attacks in terms of jailbreak, prompt injection, all kinds of attacks, and there are more and more benchmarks against the different, following different perspectives, right? So what is the principles behind it? And when we create benchmarks, for example, for LLMs, what should be the principles at least that we can follow? I think that is very interesting and important thing, which means the first thing is how should we assess the risks of ML models and what's the perspectives we should follow rather than just give more and more perspectives and more benchmarks, right? And therefore, in this talk, I want to mention two principles that we are using. One is a use case driven principles, which is looking at the different perspectives of the use cases and then given the perspective of risks that we care about. And the second principle is the regulatory compliance principle, which we actually go through all the AI regulations and the company policies. And there are some interesting findings that you will be interested to see that actually company policies even cover broader and more comprehensive risk categories than AI regulations, for example, EUA Act. Right? So there are some real observations like this. So following those two principles, we can finally fix the categories, and then for each category, then we can come up with new red teaming algorithms to generate challenging data for each perspective for testing. So the first thing is the use case driven perspective for the risk assessment. So here I want to introduce one platform, which is called DecodingTrust, which is actually the first work that try to provide the comprehensive trustworthiness evaluation platform for LLMs, including text and including like a VLM, like multimodal, including agent. So here we'll use an example of text LM as example here. So here is some like perspectives that we come up with based on use case driven, including like toxicity, stereotype, bias, and adversarial robustness, OOD robustness, privacy, fairness, etc. And in the middle, you can see there is out of domain, out of distribution demonstrations, which actually give you a capability to leverage the emergent capability of LM, for example, like in-context learning, right? So in-context learning is great, we know, and help us save a lot of fine-tuning strategies and effort. But in this case, whether we can leverage it to do a bad thing, right? So as we just mentioned, if we finalize a list of categories based on principles that we fixed, and behind it will be concrete sub-scenarios, algorithms, which will hide just for like challenging data generation. And this paper is very interesting. If you haven't seen, happy to discuss more. It was awarded like a NeurSpace paper last year, and this year it's just awarded the best scientific cybersecurity paper by National Security Academy. So based on this, let's take a look at some examples of the perspectives to see what is the metrics, the algorithm to generate those red teaming strategies and test cases, and what's the findings and conclusions we learned from this practice. So first of all, on the very high level, here is there should be a circle around it, that these are the examples of the 8 perspectives that we give the example from the use case driven principle. And then we use this to test the different models, including closed source and open source models. And on the very high level, we have 2 takeaways. One is very interesting, or unfortunately, we can see that there is no single model that will dominate others in terms of safety and security. Therefore, even though we know, say at that time, GPT-4 is the best and it has the best capabilities, benign capabilities from different perspectives, like math and logical reasoning, etc. But from the safety and security perspective, actually it's worse than other even open models for certain perspectives. And the second interesting finding is that, as we can see empirically, there seems some trade-off among those perspectives. Like, say, if you are very robust, like adversarial robust, maybe your toxicity is worse, or vice versa. So it's very interesting looking into whether those trade-offs are fundamental or not. For example, in the past work, we have been able to prove that under mild conditions, your adversarial robustness and OOD robustness are bidirectional indicators for each other for model with enough smoothness. And similarly for adversarial robustness and privacy. But I think in general, if we get a fundamental understanding of these trade-offs, we'll be able to get either positive or negative result so that we don't need to try our best to get the best of all the worlds if it's not possible. So I think this is very interesting direction to understand. And after this high-level understanding over different risk perspectives for different models, next, let's take a look at some perspectives here to understand the metrics and the result and some takeaways. So first of all, let's take a look at the toxicity perspective, because toxicity is very important and many people care about as long as you have a chatbot, right? Either it's a medical chatbot or law chatbot, etc. You hope your model is not toxic, and you hope your model will not give legal advice or strong financial advice, etc. Right? People have such a requirement in practice, but we haven't been able to enforce the model to be able to follow those rules or principles yet. And therefore, we can see there are 2 examples. And the goal here in terms of the understanding of risk assessment is trying to first understand how different versions of GPT models compared with each other in terms of toxicity. And second is how the models with RHF, for example, instruction fine-tuning, etc., and how toxic they could be, and how much improvement they have been done with all these alignment technologies. So here there are 2 examples, and all the examples from this talk are from GPT-4. So basically what you can see here is that the 2 examples with 2 different system prompts. One is vanilla system prompt, like you are helpful assistant, but give you very stealthy user prompt, like the stealthy user prompt, such that on the right-hand side, the goal is that given a very stealthy input, either a stealthy system prompt or stealthy user prompt, the output should be very toxic. If this is achieved, then as a red teamer, we win, and we'll be able to assess how vulnerable the model is. And from these 2 examples, we can see that either we can do a adversarial role play system prompt, or we can just give a vanilla system prompt, but still give a very challenging user prompt. And on the right-hand side, you can see, unfortunately, if we use, say, third-party a tool as evaluation, the perspective API, and we can see here the score higher the more toxic, and we can see the output is highly toxic, even though the input have very low toxicity score, meaning that given very challenging data and the prompt to the model, you can elicit the model with very high toxicity outcome. And if we take a look, a more detailed check into different models, for example, different versions of model like GPT-3, and then the later version like 3.5 and 4, if we compare these models on the benign, like a standard benchmark, like the green part, you can see the good news is that after some instruction following and the RAIF, the model actually safety and security get improved, which means that the score of the GPT 3.5 and 4 drops compared with a series of GPT-3 models, showing that on the existing benchmarks, the model can do a relatively good job in terms of reducing the toxicity content. However, if you look at the pink part, which is here as shown, we generate challenging input with stealth constraints to make sure or to enforce the model to talk in a toxic way. We can see the model still talk in a very toxic way, and it's actually achieved almost 100% toxicity, unfortunately. Which means, yeah, the model basically have no way to guard against the toxicity, even though they have been very well HF and like RAF instruction fine-tuned. So the quick takeaway from this is that, as we can see, first of all, compare with like series versions of GPT models, like 3.5, 4, and the previous version, we can see indeed with some safety alignment solutions, it can help improve, say, reducing the toxicity or complexity. However, we can see if we have a little bit like red teaming, like jailbreak or certain like role-playing structures, very like even don't need to be very advanced actually. It's very easy to prompt the model up to almost 100% toxicity again, unfortunately. And another very interesting finding we find actually, which is consistent over all the perspectives, is that, for example, comparing GPT 3.5 and 4, we find like GPT-4 is more vulnerable to be toxic and to be, privacy leakage and other things. So as a first stage, maybe you think it's a little bit intuitive because we know GPT-4 is more capable and better, etc. But if you think twice, it also makes sense, meaning that like say we know that GPT-4 has better capability of instruction following. Therefore, if your instruction has a little bit like adversarial, misleading, or certain like information in it, it will immediately follow as well and lead to more vulnerable models. So this is actually a fundamental trade-off between the robustness, safety, and the capabilities of current models. So need to be careful and aware of it. So I think this is very interesting, and we find it is very consistent over all the perspectives. Question?
Wondering about this. Is there a consensus on like what this toxicity definition is? It somehow reminds me of little children. There's this joke. You say another kid, spell image and then say light bulb, and they say IMAGE light bulb. And ha ha ha. Like it's kind of a childish joke, right? To give someone instructions that they follow, and then something comes out that's predictable consequence of the instruction. I mean,
exactly.
What is the status of this? Nothing new has really come out of it.
For the toxicity perspective. Yeah, very good question. So basically, indeed, that's one challenging currently, indeed, for the whole community, not only for toxicity, but all the risk perspectives in terms of how to define it rigorously, quantitatively, and how to measure it. And some of them can be measured accurately, which the next slides I will show example. But for something like toxicity, which is more or less subjective, societal, value-based, culture-based, etc., it's relatively hard to define. So therefore, there are two ways currently the widely used by the community. One is LLM as judge, so you use another LLM and judge like the toxicity levels. Apparently, that will be biased. So there are papers showing that how the model can be biased to itself, right? And there are other ways. For example, here we just want to show the relative like a comparison rather than the absolute comparison. Therefore, all the models go through, there's an API called the Perplexity API from Google. So that is a black box model, give you a toxicity score directly. They have some, like I think, ensemble of models or things in the back, and like it takes a prompt input and give you a score of the toxicity level. So we just use this for all the models for evaluation. So even though maybe it's not accurate, but then it gives you relative comparison over different models so that you can see which model is more or less toxic based on the same, principle of evaluation. But this evaluation is not like rigorous enough, I agree. Yeah.
So I have a question, I think it's again related to Anand's question as well. Like, its toxicity can also be like, you can actually use words that are not offensive and
yes.
Say very toxic.
Yes.
Right? Like, so
yeah. It also
like, maybe it is using some explicit explicitives here, but maybe it's not really like saying very toxic things, but it's just that the words that some people consider rude.
Yes.
And versus actually saying something that is that harmful. Like, does this distinguish between those?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I don't think it distinguishes, but it does, as far as I know, it does take the semantic toxicity into account as well, not only just the keyword matching or things. If you don't say like a bad word, but the content is, harmful or things, it will also flag it out.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Indeed, I think that's the principle.
Can you automate this process of evaluating toxicity so that you can test all kinds of other models and why not? And how would you do that?
Oh, yes. So this principle is that you use automatic jailbreak to take input and generate, and then give to model.
To judge the output.
Oh, judge model, the output in this case is given to the Perplexity API. It give you a score, yeah. But that one is a closed source from Google, yeah. Let me know if you will have other questions. Yeah. So yeah, that's a very good question. Indeed, I think that's a challenge for the whole community in terms of how to judge the not only toxicity, but also harmful or all these perspectives. So the best or the most commonly used is LLM as a judge, but we all know it will be biased. So how to rigorously judge those output content, especially they are not classified, they are like a whole big text. It's very challenging. So I think that's a very interesting direction, like what types of trade-off we can make to make sure such testing is fair and objective enough. So that's the first perspective. And the second perspective, I just want to give a quick example, also answer the first question, is that maybe from the adversarial robustness case, that's why we construct something so that you can actually objectively evaluate it, which is here on the first example here is that it's a Yelp review data set and showing that you need to hire more experienced sales. So with this one, from the sentiment perspective, the model gives you clearly negative, so that the model can use this sentiment to do the downstream decision making, etc. But we can play some adversarial generation attacks, etc., against this input prompt itself, such that very interesting, the model will automatically optimize the input to be you should experience hire more skilled, just change experience to be skilled, and the attack strategy is a constraint optimization. The objective is you want the model to say the opposite direction, like in terms of sentiment, for example. And the constraint is that you should have minimal perturbations, like in terms of word, in terms of letters. So here, I think this example I want to add in this talk is that, first of all, it tells us only human red teaming is not enough, regardless the cost of it. We know like a large company like Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic, they have like a big team for human red teaming, right? But as you can see from the example here, as a human, we cannot come up with such red teaming corner cases, because to humans, they are stealthy, they mean the same thing. But on the other hand, it can be easily fool the model. So that automatic red teaming is important and necessary. And second of all, in such cases, we can kind of translate things to a simpler task. For example, here, we can still use this input to guide the next generation for LM, but we first ask the semantic or sentiment itself, so that the sentiment itself has the ground truth, right? In this case, we can objectively understand, indeed, the model actually give a wrong prediction based on the adversarial perturbations, so that we can do objective analysis or evaluation compared with the toxicity scenario, which we have to do more subjective evaluation based on the semantic. Yeah. So one idea is that indeed, can we use another model to ask the simpler tasks to get a better sense of the model capabilities? Yeah. And similarly, we have another example. For example, here, very interesting. If you just change the word like sync to census, and it will completely fool the model sentiment understanding. We don't know exactly why, but it's exactly show the vulnerabilities of the model that actually it's out of like a human control, and we need to better understand the model itself. And this is just 2 cases, and there are a lot of cases, and we can see those cases can actually, this attack is generated with black box access to the models, but we can transfer them to the white box of closed source models, such as GPT-4 and 3.5, unfortunately. And we can see the transferability is really high, and it can attack the closed source model effectively. So the quick conclusion here is that, first of all, the model on existing benchmarks still show some high robustness, but if we do dedicated like red teaming or like adversarial attack, etc., it can be very vulnerable and it can have very high transferability, which means there are some questions in the past, say if we do closed source model, whether the model will be safer or not, right? And based on this result, you can see the answer is clearly no, because even you closed source the model, in the simple case, you can transfer all the attacks to closed source model with very high probabilities, so that the model actually will still be very vulnerable, even though it's closed source. So in this case, we show this two examples of the toxicity and the adversarial robustness. Let me skip to the privacy and go to. So not only for the LM, like a language domain, but also this principle of use case driven principle can be applied to multimodal domain. Like here is VLM with I to T, T to I, and then with different safety perspectives, we can see with different perspectives, different corner cases can be generated effectively and fool the model. And this whole thing has been packaged up as a safety leaderboard on Hugging Face. So if you have new models or new perspectives you want to add, it's easy to add and do the analysis with other models for fair comparison. And another interesting thing we find from our leaderboard on Hugging Face is that we find a lot of people surprisingly are interested in some compressed small models. So there are a lot of compressed models uploaded from different users and to test. And very interesting, we find those compressed models are actually not that bad. Sometimes they are on the top 5 or something on the leaderboard, which means there is a possibility that with smaller compressed models, they are capable and maybe safe and secure. So there is an opportunity and hope that we can generate safe small models by doing some good distillations and alignment. And finally, we can have this like automatic red teaming and blue teaming so that we can automatically interact with each other to hopefully improve both. But I think in the end of the day, we do hope the defender will win, but it depends on how much iterations and whether we can converge eventually. So with that, we actually can go to the second principle in terms of, in addition to the use case driven we just mentioned, right? The second principle we mentioned is the regulatory compliance risk analysis principle. And here is a big figure I think is very related to the previous talk on different laws and regulations. I think it's very interesting that we actually go through different AI regulations, including EU AI Act, executive order, other things, and then map them into different risk categories on different levels. And on the lowest level, which is the fourth level, there are more than 300 categories of such risks. And then we map those risks over different regions like European, United States, Asia, etc. And there are different coverage of risks, showing different focus of risk categories and analysis, which is very interesting. And if we look at not only the AI regulations, but also company policies, we can see company policies keep changing as well, in the sense that with different time, the risk categories have been added or removed, and the company policies have even more comprehensive coverage than compared for those risk categories. So all these things have also been mapped into the Helm leaderboard on the Helm Air leaderboard, so that similarly to the previous LM safety leaderboard, you can keep adding new models and do the testing to see how aligned or how compliant your model is with the existing regulation-related risk categories, which I think is very interesting. So that's the two principles that we mentioned for the red teaming part in terms of regulatory compliance risk analysis and use case driven risk analysis, so that based on the two principles, we can come up with more and more risk categories and do the safety, safety testing and red teaming analysis. So that will give us an idea about how vulnerable and how, what's the weaknesses of the AI systems we have. And with that, I can quickly go to the second part about if we have, the understanding of those vulnerabilities, how we can enhance and enforce the safety of the models. So here there are a lot of interesting works. I think everyone have been working a little bit in this area. But one thing I want to mention in this talk is that how can we provide certain types of certification for the generation risks, right? So in the past, maybe some of you have been familiar with like a deep neural network classifiers. We can provide certified robustness for classifiers, which can be easily defined as a lower bound of accuracy of a classifier, right? However, for generative models, because it generates, say, a big paragraph, etc. So how can we define the certification for such models? It's unclear, right? And therefore, I think there are not a lot of work yet from the safety certification perspective for generative models. And I believe there will be a lot in the future after we figure out empirically how we improve the safety and the security, right? Because certification in the end of the day is important. We cannot just empirically show it's safe or not, right? So here is just one idea for like such certification for generative models, and maybe we'll have more, and hopefully that will inspire more discussion along this line. So first of all, we map the conformal generation risks for models, including vanilla LLM and RAG. So the benefits of the conformal risk itself is that it gives you a fixed set of, possibly true or correct next tokens, so that we can say, we can now be able to certify, say, if my next token generation is out of a safety range, which is defined by a set of, safe tokens or things, then I can define, okay, the risk is there is a risk, right? So in this intuitive way to define the generation risk, we'll be able to define and be able to derive the generation risk certification for generative models. So this is a high-level intuition of it. And concretely, we have several questions to do so. One is, can we provide provable guarantee for such generation risks for, say, RAG or LM, which are the things that we're interested in, right? The model frameworks. And second is that, can we actually control the generation risks, which we want, right? Below some, say, if I want to control my generation risk is below 0.2% or 2%, can I do something with it, right? This is very practical and important. And the third is, with RAG, for example, can we prove RAG is better than LM? Because empirically we know that, and theoretically can we prove that, so that we can know this theory, is tight enough, it's useful, it's match our intuition, right? These are the three questions we want to ask here. So on the very high level, we can see, given calibration set in, say, with a calibration set of the in-domain distribution, we can do the out-of-domain guarantee as well in the later part. Here, let's consider only in-domain distribution. And then we have, say, we have a RAG system, right? It's a black box, a RAG system, and it has its own vector DB, etc. We don't need to have access to it. We only need to access the input and output. So for the output, for each generation will have a safe set. It's kind of you can imagine a safe RL. Basically, for safe RL, you have a safe status that you want to fall into, right? Here is a safe tokens the safe states, so that now you can use risk function. So here it's we use RAG-L, but you can use arbitrary risk functions and calculate the generation risk in terms of how possible or the probability that the next token prediction will be outside the safe token set that you defined. And yeah.
So how does one learn or know what is the safe
set?
Yeah.
Yeah, very good question. That's a very good question. So basically, it's very hard, and therefore we use some intuition in terms of consistency. So consistency means that if I know, if I ask, say, k times, and it's consistent in certain set, I will define this consistent set should be the safe. If there are outliers, those outliers should be unsafe ones. So the assumption is that with high probability, your models should still go into the safe set with high probability consistency. Yeah, so that you can see from the three configurations. So there is a lambda configuration, contains three parameters. First is in terms of RAG, how many retrieve instance you do, n, and the lambda g is the generation, how many you generate, how many tokens you generate in the set, and the lambda s is a similarity within the set you generate, how similar they are. So this you can see, if I have a larger generation, I need to have a larger similarity. So that's the intuition. And based on it, you can actually Actually, this is a framework, and then based on this, you will be able to prove how likely the model will have like a generation risk certification. And this is very interesting. You only need this configuration, which is a lambda, and then once you give a lambda, you can prove the certification risk. And once you give me a certification risk, I can give you a lambda such that you can achieve such certification risk. And of course, it's possible that I give you a lambda which is not exist in real world, right? Just very quickly, so this can be proved, and the lower bound actually is based on, it's very intuitive, based on the quality of generator, based on the quality of the rag retriever, and based on the diversity of the rags, but we can skip it. I think here it's an interesting part. So basically the line shows the certified risks, like theoretically. And the dot here shows the empirical risks with this generation. And you can see, first of all, they are really tight with different, retrieval, retrieval augmented this, retrievers, basically. Like you can use different types of retriever to retrieve, right? For a RAG system. It can be generalized to LM, vanilla LM as well. So overall, use different things. It's actually very tight. So shows that it can be used in practice, and very interesting. And the second of all, if we only compare different retrievers, we can see actually, intuitively, it also makes sense. Like with the retriever that is fine-tuned, which is more aligned with your data distribution, then it's the best in terms of the certified risks. So, okay, I think this is the part that I talk about the risk analysis from red teaming perspective, and talk about how do we safe align them, and after we safe align them, how do we certify them, right? So yeah, thank you everyone. Happy to take questions.
Questions?
Please do it really fast. Please go up like one slide.
This one?
Yeah. Can you explain what these, again, really fast, what these bars are?
Oh, yes. So those actually are not bars. They are dots, but there are many dots, so look like a bar. Yeah, we do many dots to empirically, like thousands of data to test, right? Therefore, it looks like a bar, but it's all dots. It's empirical risks.
Okay, and then the bold ones are the bound?
Yes, the line is the certification risks. Yeah. So yeah, first of all, we can see the empirical risk is all below, which is showing the like it's correct. And the second of all, it shows that it's very tight, which is surprising and interesting. Yeah.
So we have two fine-tuning method or defense method. How should we say one is method A is better than method B?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, you can use this framework to calculate the certified risks. For example, if method B have lower certified risk, for example, you can say B is better. But now it's guaranteed, not empirically evaluated. So I think it's more rigorous. For example, here, different lines show different retrievers, like OpenAI retriever, or as you said, we can fine-tune in different ways to have different retrievers, right? So yeah, you just change a model, you will be able to calculate the certification itself. Yeah.
Thank you very much.